Good morning, everybody. Well, in actual fact, it's good afternoon, everybody. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, the 7th of September, 2021. Okay. Hello, George. Hello, Abigail. Hello, Mummy, and hello, Daddy. Rightio, here we go. And guess what we've got here? As usual, the adventures of the little wooden horse. We're up to chapter 7. The little wooden horse goes to sea. Okay, so this is going to be interesting, isn't it? Now, we know that when we go back over the previous page, we saw that the little wooden horse was actually towing a big barge up the river, wasn't it? Or down the river, I should say, to the sea, to a seaport from coming down a river, big canal. And the little wooden horse in the finish had to pass another big barge called the Charlotte Marie, and they only just had time to free their horse before the Margarita swung past them, almost at the gate into the port from the canal. So they only just managed to unhitch the horse, and it would have been an emergency if they hadn't unhitched the horse from the barge, because something could have happened to the horse. If one barge passes another, the rope would have got caught and pulled the horse into the canal. So it's good they managed to do that. So now we start on chapter 7. The little wooden horse goes to sea. Once in the port, the barge people quickly took the rope off the little wooden horse's neck and told him to run and hide himself until they had sold their pit props, when they would come and pay him the rest of the money they owed him. They were so kind, he knew he could trust them. So the little wooden horse trundled away to hide among the timber and the rigging till it should be safe for him to come out again. The timber and the rigging. That's amongst all of the timber that's being stored at the port, the wood that's being stored at the port, and in amongst the rigging of barges. That's the stuff that's used on barges to hold the wood on the barges so it doesn't fall off, and all the ropes and stuff like that, all the stuff that's needed to tow different merchandise, different stuff down the river on the barges. That's what rigging is. So he trundled away to hide among the timber and the rigging till it should be safe for him to come out again. Meanwhile, Farmer Max, who'd been chasing him all this time, you remember old Farmer Max? Meanwhile, Farmer Max had tied up his horse and was trying to get into the port. But as he had no passport, everyone laughed at him and refused to open the gate. So you needed proper papers before you could actually enter the port. So presently he had to go to a hotel and buy food for his horse before riding back to his farm, as angry as a man could be. The little wooden horse went to the far side of the port and watched the pit props being lifted onto a ship, 50 at a time, by a large crane. Then, to his astonishment, an elephant, who had been patiently standing at the side of the port with his keeper, was also lifted into the air and swung across the deck for all the world as though he weighed nothing at all. "Well, that is very extraordinary," said the little wooden horse, who had never seen such a strange sight in his life. He was still standing and staring when the sailors noticed him and began laughing at the little red horse. Look at this funny little wooden horse staring at the crane. Well, my fine fellow, would you like a ride through the air for nothing? The little wooden horse did not know what to reply. Well, he said to himself, here I am, a quiet little horse with no particular wish for adventure, having won the race all of the barges to the port, having won the race of all the barges to the port, and escaped from the axe of an angry old woman and the clutches of a wicked farmer, and now I'm being offered a ride through the air. And who is to say whether the boards of a ship are not harder than the bed of cabbages? Still, thought the little wooden horse, what did not hurt the elephant is hardly likely to hurt me. So he thanked the sailors and told them that he would very much like a ride through the air if he might give them the trouble. The sailors put 2 bands under his wooden body, and then the crane began to lift him. Up, up, up he went, far higher than he had ever dreamed of flying, higher than the old woman's roof, higher than the trees in the forest. There's a picture we'll show you of the little wooden horse there on the crane up above the water, being lifted up and up and up. Up, up, up he went, far higher than he had ever dreamed of flying, higher than the old woman's roof, higher than the trees in the forest. He looked down on the port and saw the Margarita with the people on her deck busy unloading the pit props. He saw the Charlotte Marie waiting outside the port with the Elizabeth close behind her. Those were the other two barges. He saw no sign of Farmer Max, who had gone away to feed his horse, and this gave him a very pleasant feeling. Now the crane began to set him down. Down, down, down he came, like the swoop of a bird. The little wooden horse thought it was a delightful feeling as he came nearer and nearer to the deck of the ship. Then he saw that the crane was not going to set him down on the deck, but in a great hole in the boards, which had led down to the hold. So there's a big opening in the deck, a big hole in the deck, and he was being lowered down into what is called a hold. That's hold, H-O-L-D, and that is down below decks. It's below the deck of the ship that everyone walks around on, but it's still inside the ship. So he was being lowered down into the hold. Down he went till he felt his 4 little wheels gently touch the ground again, and there he was in a stall beside the elephant under the dock. Or should I say, under the deck, because he's inside the boat. They were both very surprised to see each other, and the little wooden horse had to tell his story a great many times before the elephant would believe him. After which, as the little wooden horse was very tired and sleepy, and the elephant's stall was quite comfortable, he curled himself up in the straw and went to sleep. When he woke up, there was a great deal of noise going on outside, and the little wooden horse decided to go find the barge people. He asked the elephant to open the door with his great trunk. But I can't open the door, said the elephant. Look how fast I am tied up. That means he's tied up so that he can't move, really can't get out of his stall. They won't let us out until we are across the sea. And there's a picture. There's a picture of the elephant down in the hold and the little red horse. Look down there beside him. Wow. So it doesn't look like he's going to get out until they're across the sea. But I don't want to go across the sea, cried the little wooden horse in a great state of agitation. When he thought of Uncle Pedder lying ill in the forest, and the barge people of the Margarita waiting to finish paying him and to give him the silver coin. "Do you want to go over the sea?" he asked the elephant. "Of course I do," said the elephant, quite surprised. "I'm going to join a circus, and I shall earn a lot of money and become very famous. Perhaps the king will come and see me, and the 10 little princes and princesses, and I shall have my name painted up in red and gold on all the tents." "That's all very well," said the little wooden horse, "but I'm a quiet little horse, and I don't want to become famous. I only want to stay beside my master. Once I've made my fortune and live happily ever after, I don't want my name written up in red and gold." He began to batter on the door with his poor little worn wheels, but there was far too much noise going on outside for anyone to hear him. Before very long the ship began to move, and he battered harder than ever, but nobody came. "So it looks like he's going overseas, whether he likes it or not." "You had far better be quiet and make the best of it," said the elephant. "Make the best of it." That means you're going to have to be happy about what's actually happened, and just be happy about it and move on. After all, who knows? You may make your fortune very quickly across the sea. And that's true, he may. The little wooden horse sat down quietly and began to think that perhaps after all the elephant was right. Across the sea there would be no Farmer Max to chase him, and he might be able to make a great deal of money. He lay down beside the elephant and made the best of it, as he had been told to do. Presently, however, the ship began to roll, and both the elephant and the little wooden horse were very seasick. They were most unhappy for 3 days and 3 nights, but then they came into another port, and that was the end of their voyage. So the ship began to roll on the sea over the waves, and they got very seasick. Never mind, it all came to an end when they came back into a port, because after a storm and you get back into the port, the water's always nice and flat again, and you can just sit quietly. Okay? Now we're up to chapter 8, a new chapter. The little wooden horse goes down the mine. Goes down the mine. Do you know what a mine is? A mine is a hole in the ground. And you know, there's a song where one of the lines of the song says, "Nothing is as precious as a hole in the ground." That's a song. It's a line in a song. And nothing is as precious as a hole in the ground, and that's because man usually mines coal or iron or aluminium or gold out of the ground, and it's very precious. Those metals are precious and are worth a lot of money. Nothing's as precious as a hole in the ground. Chapter 8, the little wooden horse goes down the mine. We'll read that to you. The little wooden horse wondered what he should do next as he waited with the elephant for the ship to be unloaded. He asked if the elephant thought the little wooden horse could earn money in a circus too. "Well, no," said the elephant kindly. "You see, your paint is just a little spoiled and worn, and then you would have to sign on for several years, and I believe you are anxious to get home to your master." "Oh, I am," said the little wooden horse hastily, and he began to wonder what else he could do to make his fortune. Now, in the mines where all these pit props are going, I believe they use a great many horses," said the elephant. "Why don't you try and get work there?" If, as you say, you are strong and a quiet little horse, I think you ought to be very successful. And he could be too. Pit ponies. They like pit ponies down the pits, down the mines in the old days to pull the wagons full of coal and the wagons full of iron ore and gold up to the surface, up to the top of the ground. The little wooden horse thought this over and decided that the elephant's advice was good. So when at last the door opened and the elephant was taken out, he trundled off to hide among the pit props that were being taken off in great loads and put into a train. After a long journey, the little wooden horse found himself at a great mine. He was lonely and he missed the elephant, for there were no horses to be seen about. For all that he had said, for all that the elephant had said, there were no horses to be seen. He crept away from the pit props and went up to the nearest miner, a large fellow with a dirty face, whose eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw the little wooden horse trundling along to meet him. When he heard what he had to say, the miner put his hands on his hips and roared with laughter. Call the foreman, he shouted. Here's a little wooden horse come to find work in the mine and wants $1 a day and his keep. Soon a little group of miners, that's the people that work down the mines, were gathered around the little wooden horse, teasing him and asking for his story. You know what teasing is? That's when somebody gives you a bit of a hard time. Sometimes that can happen when you're amongst some people, and some of them may tease you about the length of your hair or the colour of your face or the type of clothes you're wearing. They'll find something that they can laugh about, and it's not very much fun. You don't want to do that to people. It's not a nice thing to do to people. Okay? The little wooden horse did not like their loud voices and black, dirty hands, but he was a quiet little horse, so he answered them politely, and at last the foreman told the men to take him down the mine to the other ponies. Ponies, and that's what I said, pit ponies. They only use small horses, and small horses are called ponies. So amid cheers and laughter, the little wooden horse was put into a kind of black cage with 9 or 10 men and lowered down an immense shaft into the mine. So an immense shaft is a huge hole, if you like, lift shaft. It's called a shaft. That's where a lift carries people up and down and up and down. You will have been in lifts at different times. Okay, so he was put in a kind of a black cage, which was the lift itself, with 9 or 10 men and lowered down an immense shaft into the mine. They led him down dark passages to the stables where the ponies lived when they were not pulling trucks. That's the wee wagons on the lines. They have little rail lines on the ground and they pull the trucks. Here they left him all alone, wondering if he would ever see daylight and Uncle Peter again, because he's away underground now, like down in a big hole in the ground, like a cave. But usually mines go down a lot further. They go a long, long way down. By and by, the ponies were brought in for the night, while the miners went up to their homes in the village above. The little wooden horse kept very still in the corner of the stable, for a big black pony had been turned into the stall with him, and he was afraid to move. But the black pony seemed to know he was there. He snuffled all around the stable till it came to his corner, and when it laid back its ears with an angry squeal, "What's that?" squealed all the other ponies in the mine, throwing up their heads as they heard the loud squeal. "Yes, what are you?" screamed the black pony, angrily as he nosed the little wooden horse all over, sniffed him all over. "And what are you doing here?" "Oh, please, I'm only a very quiet little horse," explained the little wooden horse as he tried to tell them his story, but the ponies were not at all pleased to see him. "What do they want with a little wooden horse here?" they said. "Aren't we good enough?" And they sulked all night. They sulked. They moaned and groaned and were sad and upset and crybabies all night long. In his corner, the little wooden horse kept as still as a mouse, but he shivered and trembled with fear. In the morning, the other ponies were no more friendly than at first. They lost no opportunity of kicking and hustling him, and when they were led out to work and harnessed to the trucks, they saw to it that the heaviest loads fell to his share and that he made the longest journeys. But the little wooden horse worked bravely, for he had the thought of Uncle Peter to encourage him, and he knew that at the end of the week he would receive his money like the other miners, and by he would make his fortune. Lovely little wooden horse, isn't he? The ponies were angrier than ever when the little wooden horse came back with his wages at the end of the first week in the mine. "We don't get any money," they complained. "We only get kicks and blows," which was partly true, for they were a lazy lot of ponies, and they soon grew jealous of the way the little wooden horse was petted and praised by the foreman. He must have been a good little worker, and that's why. So when Sunday came and the ponies were taken up for a scamper in the field above the mine, they managed to leave the little wooden horse behind, and he had to spend a long, lonely day in the empty mine by himself. This happened week after week, but the little wooden horse was patient. He spent the days counting up his money and wondering how soon he would have enough to take back to Uncle Peter. One day he was working in a far corridor of the mine with 3 other ponies and some miners. The day's work was nearly over, and the little wooden horse was glad, for the ponies had been laughing at him all day long, and he wanted to get back to the quiet corner of the stall where he slept. "Your master would not know you now," the ponies teased him. "He wouldn't know you now if he looked at you." That's what they'd be saying. "Red saddle, blue stripes, all gone, all black as coal," because he would have been black with all the coal. He was down a coal mine, and you know what coal's like. It's black stuff, and it comes off on your hands and fingers. And the poor little wooden horse, he would have been covered in it, and you wouldn't have seen any nice paint or anything like that anymore. He would have just been black, like a black horse, all black as coal. The little wooden horse knew very well that his beauties were faded, and lately he had lost a wheel. Lost a wheel. That's not so good. So that he pulled the trucks along, cloppity-clack, and even the kind-hearted miners smiled when they heard him coming. "But when I have made my fortune," said the little wooden horse, "I shall have a new coat of paint, new wheels, a new red saddle, and 3 new blue stripes. One can't have everything at once." How true. The day's work was nearly over when there was a rumble in the mine, and all the miners stopped working to listen. "What's that we can hear? What's that?" The 3 ponies pricked up their ears. "What's that?" asked the little wooden horse. "That was an explosion." "Didn't you know that?" The other ponies scoffed. "Part of the mine has fallen in somewhere." "That was an explosion. Didn't you know that?" "Part of the mine has fallen in somewhere. Oh dear, that's not too good." "We had better go back," said the men, and they began to harness the ponies. The little wooden horse was hardly free before there was a tremendous explosion quite close to him. There's a picture. Look at that. Kaboom. And the little wooden horse, look at him. He's being blown up. Let's hope he's going to be all right. Like 1,000 peals of thunder. 1,000 peals of thunder. You know what one peal of thunder sounds like? Crack, rumble, rumble, rumble. Imagine 1,000 peals of thunder. That's an awful lot of peals of thunder. Run, run, he heard the men say. And in a moment things began to rattle about his wooden ears, as though the roof of the world were coming down. But it was only the roof of the mine they were in. The awful crashing went on, and the little wooden horse was knocked over and over and flung about and battered, till at last he lay still under a pile of loose stones. That's what happened to him in the picture there. Look at him in the picture. Look at that. It's not too good, is it? It's not too good. This is a very strange thing, said the little wooden horse as soon as he could hear himself speak. Here am I, a quiet little horse that only asked to stay by his master's side, flung out into the wide world, to seek my fortune, tossed across the sea, and now the roof of the world itself has come down on my head, and I shall never see my master again. You can imagine he would feel like that, because when mines collapse and fall in, and they do sometimes, they can kill people, and it can hurt people, and it's quite terrible what can happen to people down in mines. I'll let your mum and dad explain that one. Eh? For the moment it seemed that the little wooden horse's words were true, for the explosion in the mine had brought down 1,000 tons of rocks down on his head, and there he was, shut in a tiny cave, many fathoms beneath the daylight. Many fathoms. A fathom is a length, and it's about as tall as your dad, George. A fathom, and he's many fathoms below the surface of the earth, way down in the mine, beneath the daylight. 1,000 miles from Uncle Peter, so he's a long, long way from Uncle Peter. Just at that moment he heard a movement beside him, and there lay the biggest of the ponies, with the 2 others close by, also knocked over by the explosion, but all alive and well, except that their noses and eyes were full of dust. So they'd be snorting and carrying on, making a lot of noise, and coughing and carrying on. What happened to the men? Asked the little wooden horse. I saw them run away, said the black pony. I think they all ran to safety before the mine fell. But what is going to happen to us? We shall all die of thirst and starvation in this little hole. But the little wooden horse was already busy exploring their prison. He pushed his little wooden head here, thrust his 3 remaining wooden wheels there, and hunted for a way to get out. I can smell fresh air, he said. Somewhere there is a chink or a crack, and I'm going to find it. A chink. What's a chink? A chink is like, well, it's a bit like where Granddad's got his finger in the book. You'd call that little hole there that I've made with my finger a chink or a crack. Just a little wee spot. And there could be air coming through it, and that's what he's saying. So somewhere there is a chink or a crack, and I'm going to find it. The ponies watched him anxiously. Oh, do find a way out, dear little wooden horse, they begged him humbly now. If you do, we will never bite you or kick you again. We were jealous and unkind, and we treated you badly, but we will never be so wicked again if you only find a way to take us once more up into the sweet yellow sunshine. Yes, the sweet yellow sunshine indeed. As the little wooden horse discovered a cranny through which the cooler air of the outer mine was blowing, and he became so excited that he thrust his head far through the crack and could not draw it back again. Now here he was in a worse plight than before, half of him in the cave, blocked and wedged in by the rocks, and half of him in the cool, dark air outside, but quite unable to free himself. Uh-oh, Abigail. What's going to happen? Inside the hole, the ponies seized him gently. That means they took hold of him gently by the tail, and pulled, but nothing could free the little wooden horse from his uncomfortable position. Pull harder, he cried, till at last the ponies were pulling with all their strength. Suddenly the head of the little wooden horse flew off and fell among the stones. He was free at last, but headless. There lay his head on the wrong side of the cranny. What's a cranny? It's a wee slit, isn't it? A wee split or a little fissure, a little hole. And his head was on the other side of this cranny from where his body was, because he poked his head through it, you see. Now he had no head and only 3 wheels, but nothing daunted the little wooden horse. He flew at the cranny, battering and thundering at it until it was large enough for him to squeeze through and find his poor little wooden head. He did not notice that while he thundered and battered, nearly all his wages flew out of the hole in his neck and were lost among the stones. Oh no, Abby. Now the little wooden horse thundered and battered harder than ever to make the hole large enough for the 3 ponies to squeeze through. He did not care that his last 3 wheels were chipped almost to fragments, and that the splinters were dropping off his once beautifully painted coat. Inside the cave, the 3 ponies battered and hammered too with their hard little hooves, till one by one they were able to squeeze through the cranny into the corridor of the mine. The corridor of the mine, that's the hallway of the mine, because as you dig a mine, you create a hallway, like in your house. And a mine is a bit like a house, really, but it's underground. It's got hallways in it, and it's got rooms that go off it, and things like that, where they dig all the coal out. And it usually has a little railway track running down the hallway, and that's where the trucks go that the horses have to pull. Okay. Then they galloped back as fast as their legs could carry them to the shaft, with the little wooden horse limping in the rear. At the entrance to the mine, the miners could hardly believe their eyes when they saw them, for they had been quite certain that the ponies had been killed in the explosion. They took them straight up to the surface for a day's holiday in the sun, and with them went the little wooden horse. When they had been shut into the field, the 3 ponies galloped around and around, wild with joy at being safe and free again. The little wooden horse stayed where he was in a corner of the field, quite quiet and still. He crouched in the long grass while the hours went by, and the other ponies shrilled and gambolled. They gambolled about the field. They ran about the field. That's called gambling. So obviously ponies do it, and so do Baalams. Especially little Baalams, they gamble about. Now and then he shook his head to hear the 3 coins jingle that still remained in his little wooden body. But he did not nibble at the clover or roll in the sunshine, for a terrible thing had happened to the little wooden horse. After all those weeks that he'd been down in the mine, he had become quite blind. Quite blind. That means he couldn't see anymore. He couldn't see. Okay. Now, guess what? We're up to Chapter 9. Chapter 9, The Little Wooden Horse Sees the King. The Little Wooden Horse Sees the King, Chapter 9. And I will be reading you at some other time. So Chapter 9 will be read at another time. So in the meantime, Granny's going to say goodbye. And it's been good to see you. It's been good to read to you. And all the best, George and Abigail Hoskins. And take it easy. And as Granny always says, Turgle Purgle. Turgle Purgle, you guys. See you later.